Welcome to Dig Deep, the mining podcast. In this podcast, we go deep into mining news, hot topics, and live interviews with mining professionals and leading figures in the mining industry. Introducing your host, Rob Tyson, founder and director of Mining International and Mining International Executive, a leading global mining recruitment and headhunting agency.
Hi mining community, welcome back to another episode of the Dig Deep, the mining podcast. And today's guest is Brian Savage, who's the CEO of Electric Metals, who are a US-based exploration and mineral development company developing the high-grade Emily Manganese mine in Minnesota with the intention of producing high-value purity manganese products for electrification and decarbonization energy transition strategies. Obviously, particularly in the electric vehicle and energy storage sector. With a mining engineering degree and a master's in mineral economics, Brian's an entrepreneurial executive with a history of identifying, building, transforming and growing businesses in challenging jurisdictions in the mining industry. And he's going to give us an update and an overview of Electric Metals and what they're looking to achieve, and obviously give us an update on the manganese market and also what's happening in North American mining industry. So that's welcome Brian to the podcast. How you doing, Brian?
Doing all right. Appreciate that, Rob. Thank you very much. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, and I know you're an active listener, so it's good to have someone on the podcast that listens to these episodes. So just wondered if you can just tell the audience a little bit about yourself, a little bit about your career. As I said, you're an entrepreneur in the mining space. So yeah, I wonder if you can tell us about yourself. Sure. So our audience knows a little bit about yourself.
You bet. So I went to Colorado School of Mines. I got a degree in mining engineering, and I worked in the coal mines in Western Colorado during summers, and then took a semester off and worked in the coal mines, wound up being a so-called experienced miner, which is how I got my first job out of college. That was one of the down cycles of the mining sector. So I wound up in operations in a Western Colorado coal mine. Was actually the foreman on the only and longest advancing longwall in the United States for coal mining. Decided to go back and get a master's degree in mineral economics, wrote my thesis on valuing gold mining companies, and while I was in grad school, I worked for a mining software development company. So I'd like to say that I got my master's degree in mining engineering while I was working for the software development company. Also worked for the Colorado Department of Health doing cost estimation on various Superfund cleanup sites. So got a bit of an understanding on so-called environmental economics and how that all works. My first job after grad school was mining engineer for Bank of New York, responsible for the technical side of the project or corporate finance facilities. And then I got recruited by Bank of Montreal to be director of their U.S. mining and metals group, responsible for U.S. companies and wherever they were doing business, project finance, corporate credit facilities, etc. And then I got moved over to what's now called BMO Capital Markets. So I was director of, back in the day, it was Nesbitt Burns Securities. So I was director of Nesbitt Burns Securities, a mining group. Shortly thereafter, I got recruited by a gentleman who was commercializing a remote sensing technology called hyperspectral imaging from NASA. Basically, you're taking reflected sunlight off the surface of the Earth using a digital camera. You can carve that wavelength up and you can identify what's being reflected. Of course, NASA was interested in friendly paint versus unfriendly paint. And you could also use it for mineral exploration. For example, we could identify a clay, and we could identify the clay that was actually a gold-bearing clay, and then you could zero in on where you wanted to focus your exploration group. That actually brought me to Kazakhstan, where we wound up on we got the concessions for the former nuclear test site for the Soviet Union, and negotiated all of those licenses, and then we wound up building a mine out there. We then acquired another copper asset, rolled that into a company called Frontier Mining, We were involved in an oil and gas company that we listed in London. We were involved in a phosphate rock project that we listed in London. After that, I wound up in China for a couple of years. Figured that they'd let me spend a lot of money, not make money. So where are we going to go? Where are the Chinese going to go for minerals? And along that time was introduced to a gentleman who was Congolese. We wound up in the Congo. We started importing cement. We built a trucking company. We sold that. We wound up buying coltan, which is tantalum and niobium from artisanal miners, upgraded that, sold it to a metal trading company. That project started winding down about the same time the Maidan revolution in Ukraine was happening. And about 6 weeks later, I had a reach out on LinkedIn from a gentleman representing the Ministry of Mines. And so we have an underground gold, silver, lead, zinc project in Western Ukraine that's unfortunately currently pretty much on hold due to Mr. Putin's madness. I was director of Amur Minerals during that period, which was developing what could be one of probably the top 5 largest nickel sulfide deposits in Far East Russia. Mr. Putin also kind of put the kibosh on that one. Company eventually sold it and distributed that dividend to shareholders, and now they've kind of become a pharmaceutical company. I wound up back in the Congo, which is kind of how I got focused in the manganese side. So a new president got elected. A friend of mine had some relationships with the government, and we decided to go back after Kasengi Manganese, which is a historic manganese mine. They produced 50% manganese ore for the steel sector for 27 years like clockwork. Benguela Railroad got blown up during the Angolan Civil War, and it sat there dormant for 40 years. So as a result, I've taken a deep dive into the manganese markets, the ore markets, ferromanganese, silica manganese, kind of understand the broad spectrum of manganese products, including high purity manganese sulfate monohydrate for the electric vehicle battery sector, electrolytic manganese metal, and electrolytic manganese dioxide, which is used in what I call flashlight batteries. And so over the course of time, a mutual friend introduced me to Electric Metals. They were looking for a new CEO who knew the manganese markets. And so now, as I say, I've been here for 3 months, so the honeymoon is over, and time to get cracking on.
Thanks for giving an overview of your career. So I wonder if you can just tell us a little bit about Electric Metals. For those that are not familiar with the story, just wonder if you can just give us an overview of the company.
Sure. Yeah, so Electric Metals has the highest grade manganese deposit in North America. It's the Emily Manganese deposit, which is in Minnesota. Because it's a high grade, it's probably twice the nearest comparable manganese deposit in the U.S. And so we're poised to become the low-cost producer of 100% domestically sourced manganese, but also high-purity manganese sulfate monohydrate for the electric vehicle battery sector. We also announced an option and acquisition agreement with Altair Resources back in November of last year, where Altair are responsible for funding the exploration program on the Nevada silver assets. So we here at Electric Metals are going to focus on advancing the Emily deposit and building an HPMSM plant.
Can you, obviously you've been in the CEO role for the last sort of 3 months. I wonder if you can give us an overview of the company's strategic goals,
Sure.
so our audience are aware of what you're looking to do in the future.
Sure. So we just recently announced our updated 43-101. So we have an updated resource at a 10% cutoff grade. We've got about 11 million tons of just about 18.26% average between inferred and indicated. So that is about double the next comparable, which gives us a competitive advantage on that. What we want to do now is we want to accelerate the development of that mine to get it into a mine plan and mine development just as quickly as we possibly can. So we are going to, have a strategy session here this coming week. We're going to have so-called all parties in the room. We're going to have the permitting people, the geologists, mining guys, processing guys, the legal people, so that when we're developing this drill program, we're going to make sure that we're going to collect all the information that everybody needs, so we can hopefully collect all that information while we do the drill program. We don't have to go back and re-drill them. That's the plan. So we want to accelerate that. At the same time, we want to accelerate the construction of a high purity manganese sulfate monohydrate plant. We're currently going to be looking at where would be the likely locations for that plant. We'll be looking in Minnesota. We'll be looking in other areas to see, kind of where it makes the most economic sense to do that. At the same time, while we're focused, I'll say, on the EV battery sector, because really it's the uptake of electric vehicles that's going to create demand for electric vehicle batteries. That's going to create the demand for this high purity manganese sulfate monohydrate. Current production, 90% of HPMSM is produced in China. And so from a supply chain issue, the supply chain risks of China controlling 90% of that, having a domestic source, especially 100% domestic source of HPMSM, is going to be a huge benefit for the North American car manufacturers and battery manufacturers.
What is manganese significance in obviously today's global market, and what's it used for, and why should our industry be interested in obviously developing manganese mines?
Sure. Manganese is the fourth most used metal by tonnage behind iron, copper, and aluminum. And so when you look at the development of the economy, anything that needs to be built generally has steel in it. And in order to make steel, you need manganese. So 90% of manganese actually goes into the steel business. And that's in the form of a manganese ore, or ferromanganese, silica manganese, or electrolytic manganese metal, for example, can also goes into that. Not all manganese ores are created equal. From a manganese ore perspective, there's a high grade, a mid grade, and a low grade manganese ore. That further gets divided into what they call lumpy and fines. Fines is a -6 millimeter product, which is what they say, it's fines. The steel plants don't particularly like fines that much because it tends to float, and that can create explosions, so they don't particularly like that. As a result, most manganese mines and even ferromanganese plants and steel plants have a briquetting plant. So a lot of times they'll turn those fines into like a charcoal briquette size material, and then they put that into the furnace. That's kind of the manganese ore market. And then from there, all those high grade manganese products, there's high purity electrolytic manganese dioxide. So you use a manganese ore, you put it through electrolysis, and it comes out the other end, and that's the stuff that goes into what I call flashlight batteries. There's high purity electrolytic manganese metal, and that's exactly what it's talking about. They're creating electrolytic metal, and that metal can go into the steel sector. It can also go into the battery sector, and it just gets dissolved in sulfuric acid, and you've got your HPMSM. From a supply chain perspective, China controls probably 95+% of the metal market. There's only two metal producers outside of China that I'm aware of. And so therefore the Chinese really control what pricing is going to be from that perspective. And then you start getting into agricultural purposes of manganese. So there's agricultural grade manganese sulfate monohydrate, which is used in a fertilizer. And then If you've ever walked by your town's wastewater treatment plant, sometimes it smells, sometimes it doesn't smell so bad, and that's because they're using permanganate, which is another use of manganate and manganese, and that's what's used to clean the water as well as reduce the smell. So it's got a number of uses, and we're going to be focused on producing manganese products for the electric vehicle battery sector. We're not going to ignore the fact that it's pretty ubiquitous, and a number of different markets to be getting into. Especially, probably advancing on your question is, how about the United States? So 100% of the manganese gets imported into the United States, no matter what it's used for. And so therefore, having a domestic supply is going to be, I'll say, absolutely critical for supply chain de-risking.
What sets Electric Metals apart from, say, other companies in the critical minerals sector? Obviously, particularly in terms of your high-grade manganese deposit in North America.
Well, that's pretty much, what's really setting us apart is the fact that we've got the highest grade manganese deposit in North America. Like I said, it's about twice the grade as the nearest comparable. And what that should allow us to do is become the low-cost producer of domestically sourced high-purity manganese products. I'll say the other critical minerals companies around the world, but we're focused in the North American market and providing that supply.
And is there a reason why you're focusing on high purity manganese products?
Sure. The value added from a pricing perspective. So when we're looking at driving revenue, the high purity manganese markets are focused to be much higher out in the future. When we're looking at that, that's going to be one of our main targets because like it or not, there is an energy transition going on, and that's both being pushed by social mood and by government regulations. So there's talk in the media about how electric vehicle offtake it is slowing down and it didn't meet expectations, but it was still, I think they were forecasting a 70% growth rate and it was only 50. So it's not like it's going backwards. the rate of change might be slowing down, but the realities are that the electric vehicle market is going to be a significant part of future car production, which is going to require batteries, which is going to require manganese products.
How does the company plan to capitalize on the obviously growing demand for metals in the green energy transition, as you mentioned, obviously particularly in relation to the electrifying of mobility and electric vehicles?
We want to get into production just as quickly as we possibly can, in order to take advantage of that market. And while the electric vehicle and the battery sector are starting to push forward, all that manganese that's being imported, we want to start displacing that.
And I suppose, why is it important for the US to have obviously a domestic manganese production?
National security, that's probably the main driver. There is a strategic stockpile of manganese. There's the critical minerals list that they come up with, and they list all the minerals that are primarily critical for national security purposes. We'll go back to the fact that China produces 90+% of the HPMSM that's currently being produced, maybe 95+% of the metal. And from a risk perspective, you really don't want to be reliant on any one country for 90% of your production capacity.
And lastly, what's the outlook for the next 6 to 12 months with regards, obviously, to the company and the Emily Manganese mine?
Sure. So like I said earlier, we're going to be having a strategy session to develop this next round of drilling. We want to incorporate artificial intelligence so that we can maximize. Working with our geologists and our mining engineers, we want to maximize the information that we get out of the drilling program and minimize the cost. And hopefully, artificial intelligence can help us along that lines. We want to start getting a scoping study done on where do we think the likely places to build an HPMSM plant are. We'll be building the mine in Emily, Minnesota. Can't move the deposit. So we'll be working with local community to get good social buy-in for that. I think the way I like to describe the mine is it will be large enough to have a positive economic impact on the community, but it won't be so large that it will overwhelm the community. So hopefully just positive effects out of that. And then as we move down kind of within this next 12 months, we'd like to get that drilling program implemented, continue on our metallurgical test work to optimize the flow sheet for producing HPMSM.
Brian, thank you for your time. Thank you for telling us about electric metals and obviously tell us about the manganese market. And it'd be good for you to come on the podcast maybe later this year or even next year to obviously give us an update on the project and obviously an update on the manganese market. Because I don't think we've had many companies on here talk about manganese. And as you mentioned, China holds the majority of the manganese and so it'd be good for you to come on and give us an update in 6 to 12 months' time.
Oh, I'd be happy to. Thank you very much.
Yeah, no worries. And also, if our audience wants to reach out to you, if they want to follow the company, follow the progress, how can they go about doing that? What social media channels are you on?
Yeah, that's electricmetals.com is the website. And we have a YouTube channel. We've got our X channel, formerly Twitter, and we're on several other social media sites.
Okay, great. We'll include those in the show notes accompanying this. So for easy access for our audience to follow your story. As I said, thank you again, and wish you all the best for the remainder of the year.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
No worries. Hope you enjoyed that episode. As always, please keep sharing. Please keep sharing these episodes. We haven't had many people come on talk about manganese, so it's probably one of those commodities out there not necessarily spoken about much, but as Brian alluded to, it's essential. It's one of the top metals for electrification as we move into obviously a green economy. So as always, appreciate your continued support. Please keep sharing these episodes, and until next time, happy mining.
Thank you for listening. Remember to reach out to Rob via the show notes and be sure to subscribe and leave a review. Until next time, happy mining, helping each other to improve the mining industry.